Hey friends, I hope your day's going well. I hope that wherever you are today, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's in your car or at your house, I hope that whatever's going on is going on well for you. I want to talk today about something that I found on social media, at least a principle, and it's something that I believed, it's something that was already running through my head, something I have said to clients before, but maybe not in these exact terms. And it's something that created a truth in me or awakened a realization in me of a truth that I think is super helpful for me and hopefully for you and can be helpful for anyone who embraces it. Just got done meeting with a men's group, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is telling ourselves the truth in that group. And I want to do that today. And I know that there are people that dislike social media. I've talked about this in the past. I enjoy it. It's free cable for me. I don't feel like I waste a lot of time on it. And maybe there would be people who look at how I spend my life and disagree with that. But I feel that, like, by and large, the time that I spend on social media is managed. It's really no different than people watching TV. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't know if that matters or not. I don't even know if I need to worry about justifying it. But I will say this. I want to talk about something that came to me through social media on TikTok, which is a super interesting animal to me. Of course, there is the controversy of it being banned and all the dangers that we are told are there or are not there. I don't know. I'm not going to wade into that too deeply on my podcast. But the thing about TikTok is you end up on, what they call different labels of TikTok. So there's book TikTok, where you get book recommendations, and I'm there. There is political TikTok, where you get, political opinions, and I'm there. And what's really interesting about that is that they're typically opinions that I wouldn't agree with, but I think, I don't know why I'm there, but I'm there. There's religious TikTok, which is all over the place. And then there's motivational TikTok, and every once in a while that shows up on my TikTok. By the way, if you are on TikTok, I am Joe Martino. You can find me there. You can find me online at joemartino.com if this is your first time joining me. All of those different places we can find space to get together. But on motivational TikTok, there was a guy who said to me today, what you avoid controls you. Or he didn't say it to me. He said it to his TikTok crowd, and I ended up being a part of that. But I want to say it again because I said it a little bit quickly there. What you avoid controls you. And that reminded me of what a powerful truth this is, because I see this all the time. When I'm in my men's group, we talk about men being passive. And the reality that we're typically passive because we want peace. Even if we're picking fights, it's actually a passive action. And in transactional analysis, which is a theory of counseling that sometimes gets used by therapists, one of the responses to feeling stuck is passivity. And the problem with passivity is it is just a little skip away from avoidance. And once you decide that you're going to avoid something, that something now controls you because you have to plan to be able to avoid it, or you pretend that it doesn't exist, and you have to ignore it. And then once you're ignoring it, it's altering your movement, right? Because if you want to do something and the thing that you're avoiding is required to go through to get there, well, now you're avoiding it, and now the thing that you're avoiding is controlling you. And so if you want to have a healthy relationship, but you want to avoid hard conversations, then the hard conversations control you, and you won't have a healthy relationship. I was talking to a guy at one time who needed a job. He had 3 kids to a previous marriage. He was remarried, had a baby on the way, and he needed a job, and he found a job in his field. He went to college for grad school, all of those things, and he needed the job. He found it. They offered him a job, but he turned it down because he was avoiding something. What he was avoiding was having to pay back student loans. His student loans were behind, and he didn't feel he could afford them. So he was avoiding talking to the student loan companies, and his wages were garnished. So if your wages are being garnished, you can only be a 1099 employee, and then they get them at the end of the year or something like that. I don't claim to be a tax expert, but he said, I know I can't be a W-2 employee because they'll garnish my wages, and I don't want to have to deal with that. Okay, you just found something that is controlling you. You just found something that you are avoiding, and therefore it's costing you something that you want. The mom that wants to raise a son that is independent, but also wants to avoid the pain of him becoming independent, will typically raise a son that is dependent on her, because what's happening is she is afraid of the potential pain that comes with raising an independent son, with raising a son that doesn't need her. And so she creates an environment where he needs her. She stunts his growth because she allows her fear to control her rather than engaging in dealing with the fear. She's avoiding it. She's staying away from it. And that creates for her a problem. And it also creates that problem for him. The thing that you will not face controls you. The thing that you have to avoid controls you. It stops you from getting, at some point, it stops you from getting where you want to go. It stops you from achieving the things that you want to achieve. And maybe, you know what, there are times where like, okay, that's right, that's a price I'm willing to pay. But a lot of times there is a hidden price that we don't think about. So the couple that says, you know what, I'm going to avoid the hard conversations. I'm going to avoid the disagreement. At the beginning, that's the price they're willing to pay, and they think they get peace. What they really get is a shallow relationship that falls apart. What happens invariably is when we start to avoid something, it starts to permeate every aspect of our lives. It starts to control how we respond. And most people believe this, right? Most people believe this intellectually. What happens though is what happens when our emotions take over. And because our emotions are speaking louder than our cognition or our logic, we still avoid things. And how do we correct that? That's really the question that we have to look at. How do we correct and change the thing that's hurting us? And so part of it is you have to do a hard inventory of yourself. What are you avoiding? Like seriously, right now, wherever you're listening to this, take a few minutes and ask yourself, what am I avoiding in my life? What's the one thing that I won't engage in? What's the thing that I keep putting off? What's the thing that I don't want to do? What are you avoiding and how is it affecting your life? Start there. Start with that self-assessment. What am I avoiding? And so once we start to lean into this, okay, what am I avoiding? What is it costing me? Here becomes the question that is perhaps the most difficult. What does it look like for me to engage it? And this should be an answer full of action steps. And we can even start with what's the smallest step that I could take? What is literally the smallest step that I could take to not avoid this thing that I'm trying to avoid? And most of the time, we're not actually avoiding something. We're avoiding a feeling, right? So we'll stick with the illustration of if you want healthy relationships, but you're avoiding the hard conversation, you're actually going to bring harm to your relationship. What's going on there is they're not actually avoiding the hard conversation. They're avoiding the thing that they fear comes from the hard conversation. They're avoiding their husband or their wife being mad at them, their child being mad at them. The mom who is stunting their child's growth, she's doing that because she's afraid of the loss of meaning if she doesn't have someone who's dependent upon her. If she doesn't have someone that she, quote, does everything for. If she doesn't have someone that she keeps safe. She's not actually avoiding like the kid growing up. That's the byproduct of it. She's avoiding the negative emotion that comes with that. And so what happens is she keeps her son or her daughter, a lot of times it's son, dependent upon her for her emotional payoff because she's afraid of what will happen if she doesn't. So then the actions become, what does it look like not only for her to let her child be independent, but what's the smallest actions that she can take that will help her deal with her own anxiety about the loss of that interaction, the loss of that meaning. Whatever that means for her, what would that look like? And that becomes the answer to the questions, because now what she's doing is she is moving forward towards what does it look like for me to heal? And so those behaviors that she's focusing on are not just setting her child free, allowing her child to grow up, helping her child become independent. They are about her healing. The guy that's avoiding difficult conversations with his wife, what he's actually trying to avoid is the pain of her being mad at him, whatever that means. And so his action steps involve not just what does it mean to engage in hard conversations with my wife, but what does it mean to heal to the point where I accept that doing the right thing doesn't mean that people won't be mad at me. And it's okay if she's mad at me. And this goes back, we've talked about this before, the 3 questions. So what, as in, so what does it mean? Why, then what? Okay, so if I'm trying to avoid hard conversations with my wife, why? Well, because she might get mad at me. So what does that mean? Well, if she gets mad at me, let's be honest, for a lot of guys, it means I might not get sex when I want it. Or there might be uncomfortableness in my home tonight. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, I won't like that. Okay, so what does that mean? And as we start to embrace that trouble, we find the thing underneath all of that that we actually need to heal, which is, well, maybe my worth goes down if people are mad at me. Maybe my self-esteem is negatively affected if people are mad at me. Maybe I don't like who I am if my wife's mad at me or my husband's mad at me, whatever it is, because certainly wives do this too. But you have to go after the thing behind the thing behind the thing, and then find action steps that help you move towards health and healing, that help you move towards wellness. What does it mean for you to be healthy and not avoid whatever the thing is that you're avoiding? Because you will be controlled by whatever it is you're avoiding. And if you can't work in such a way that you're not being controlled by it, in other words, you're not avoiding it, it will always control you. It's not overly profound or deep, but it is a truth that we don't think about much. And so how you overcome being controlled by the thing that you're avoiding is you don't let it control you by avoiding it. What? Right, exactly. You don't not avoid it. You have to go engage it. You have to engage the very thing that you're afraid of. This is one of the reasons that we've really messed up self-esteem with our kids, because we have taken away all of their struggles. We have taken away all of their dangers. We have taken away all of their foibles. We have structured their play for them. We have made it impossible for them to struggle. And at some level, I get that because the world comes for them. I have purposely kept my kids somewhat sheltered. In fact, somebody said to me recently, well, your son's really sheltered. And you could tell by the way they were saying it, they meant it as an insult. And I didn't take it as such. I took it as oh, good, I'm glad that you noticed. Because the world will come for him. At the same time, he has to learn to engage hard things. And I can't avoid him in doing hard things, because those hard things, him doing those hard things, are hard for me to watch because he might fail. I can't do that. I have to allow him to struggle. If whatever it is that I want to avoid, maybe I have a medical issue. My wife and I knew a lady who found a lump on her chest and just acted like it didn't exist. She just acted like it didn't exist. And you probably know where this story goes. She died from breast cancer. But you think about it, all the things that she had to do to avoid that, and that is kind of the ultimate control. She lost her life to breast cancer, which is awful and terrible. And I think of her kids a lot, who were kids when she died. They lived in the consequences of her avoiding something. Because that's kind of the 4th step. Once we decide to start, okay, what are the action steps that I can take? We will be discouraged. I guarantee it. You will find discouragement when you decide to embrace action steps to not avoid something. And so the trick here, once we're there and we start to find that discouragement, is we need to remember our motivation. Why are we not embracing this? Or why are we embracing this? And if we're not embracing it, we're trying to avoid something, right? Which we get. We understand we don't want to do that, because then it controls us. So then why are we embracing the idea of I have to make actions in order to grow and to heal? In other words, why do I want to heal? One of the biggest reasons is people that we love will live in the consequences of us avoiding things. The things that we try to avoid that control us create consequences in other people's lives. I have a friend that's an alcoholic. If he avoids that reality, his wife and his children live in that reality. They live in the reality of him being an alcoholic because he refuses to admit it. And you can't address the thing that you refuse to admit. But when he does admit it and start to address it, he's going to find frustration. He's going to find discouragement. And when we find discouragement, we have to have clear whys. Think about last week when we talked about goals. And we talked about, by the way, if you haven't listened to that, it's the very first episode of 2025, where we talk about the fact that most resolutions fail by the second Friday of January. It's called Quitting Friday. But part of that is people don't have very good whys attached to their goals. And we've talked about this numerous times over the years. I can't believe I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this almost 7 years of episodes. It's just wild to me that it's been that long. And we've talked a lot about the whys and how important they are for your goals. Because what we want to do is we want to make change so that we're healthy and the people that we love are healthy. So we start with a self-assessment. What am I avoiding and how much does it cost me? We then move to what are the behaviors, the steps, the smallest steps maybe, that I can start to engage to make that happen, to get that done, to make change, to not avoid it. And then we do want to find who else is living in the consequences of this. Who else am I negatively impacting because I'm avoiding discomfort, so that we can find motivation to continue moving forward. Now, that's not the only motivation. We could also go the route, and if you've been listening for any amount of time, you know that I support this. We could go the route of what are the benefits to my life if I make these changes? I think that's important, right? What are the benefits to my life? How will I be healthier? And what are the benefits of me being healthier if I make these changes? All right. Let me know. Send me an email. What are you avoiding and how are you finding it affecting your life? And what would it look like for you to change? I'd love to hear from you. Hey, if you find value in this, please don't hesitate to share it with your friends. That really helps me, and hopefully it helps your friends. All right. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.